What's up, awesome folks? Claudia here, along with the brains behind the breakdown, Alex, for another episode of Not Your Average Breakdown. This is where we spill the tea on all things current and toss it your way. Alex, you are back home and recording with your better mic. Woo!
Yes, finally. It's been a struggle last week, and editing has been even a bigger struggle. So I'm glad I'm back home and sounding good.
Yes. I mean, I listened to our last episode and I really didn't think it was that bad, but you probably did some wizardry on the sound, right?
I did, yes. My headset is not that good, so I have to buy another one because I'm going back to Fort Liberty in 2 weeks. So recording on the road, I need better equipment. So that's gonna happen. There was some clicking, but I took as much as I could.
I think you did really well. I barely heard it, but I remember we were recording and stopping and starting, stopping and starting. So I imagine what you had to go through just to get that episode out. But it was a good one.
I think so too. And we are on a congressional hearing streak.
Oh man, nothing makes you happier. that's
I
a good
know.
that's a good segue because today's topic is a true surprise for us all. Because literally, Alex just told me what we were talking about, as this topic for tonight has changed a few times. So, today we are talking about the congressional hearing that occurred today, the last day of January 2024, and it was about child exploitation on social media. So, Alex, you're just going to have to wing it and tell us all, and I'm going to wing my questions at you.
Okay, yeah, I know. I'm sorry I switched it last minute, but I think this week we had a couple of topics that we were sort of considering to record, and I know yesterday we agreed on a different one. But today something major happened, and I wasn't aware of this. Last week I didn't really follow that much news. I was conducting military training, so I usually stay away from the news because I'm very hands-on in what I do in the military. So today I turn on my usual. I sit at my desk, I work, start my morning coffee, turn on ABC News, and they started streaming this live hearing that was happening in Congress today. And it was all the CEOs from major social media platforms: TikTok, X, Snapchat, Discord, and Meta. I turn on the mic because sometimes I don't have the volume on. I just sort of like have that on in case something major happens, like I glance at it. So I turn up the volume and they're talking about child exploitation and child safety on social media platforms. And I mean, these senators were grilling them. And so I went on C-SPAN to watch a full live hearing. For people that don't know, do you know what C-SPAN is?
It's a news outlet.
Yeah, so you can watch like 24/7 pretty much, like congressional hearings, like
Mm,
anything that happens, they report on the government.
hmm
So like any major or minor hearings that are happening, all these subcommittees, you can watch it live. And so I went there and I watched the full hearing, and I was taking notes. Like I started my OneNote and I was just like an insane person, just like typing. And I was shocked, right? And I was like, oh no, we need to cover this. And I'm thinking in my head, oh my God, if I ever wanted any of our episodes to go viral, this is the one. Not for the glorification of us or anything, but I just feel like this topic is so major. And if people don't watch news, they will not know it is happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't even know what you were, but also I'm in a bubble over here in a bubble. So that's why I have you because you are on notice for these sorts of things.
I know. I think this is like a true, not your average breakdown, you and I discussion when something is happening in the government and you and I discuss it privately. So I think this is like a great topic for us to cover on our podcast. So I might do it a little bit differently because I took a whole bunch of notes. Usually our episodes, I just sort of freestyle it. I try to tell you a story, but I feel like I need to do this justice to tell you what is happening and why this is important, but I also want to spread the word and spread awareness of what our congressional leaders are working on. And this is, I'm gonna really start with this, that this is a very rare instance where you can see our congressional leaders working together. This is a bipartisan issue. If you really want to see how our government works for us, you should watch this hearing, because this is a Senate Judiciary Committee, which is a bipartisan committee. So it means there are Republicans and Democrats on it. And they even said, Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina or Georgia, I think he's from South Carolina, he said he's a far right Republican. And he was like, I have nothing in common with Elizabeth Warren and I forgot another senator that he named who are Democrats. He said, but we all agree on this issue. And that is so important because there is a lot of polarization of politics in today's age, especially because of the general elections that are happening in this November. And there is a lot of problems that we have on the border and immigration and this and that. And it seems that we cannot get to agree.
Can you tell me how a topic like this actually gets to Congress?
Yes. So, February of 2023, there was a congressional hearing that was done on child safety issues on social media platforms, because a lot of families, or increased number of families, started movements and tried to sue social media platforms like Meta, Snapchat, Twitter at the time. So what has been happening is in 1996, okay, like we got to start here. And shit's fucked up when we have to start in 1996. There was an act that was passed by Congress, and it was called Communication Decency Act of 1996. And this is when the internet was just becoming a thing, and we didn't know a lot. We didn't, like, there was no social media at the time.
Right.
There
Yep.
was, life was much different in 1996 when it comes to technology, okay? And initially that act had a section 230, and you will hear this repeatedly cited, not just in this congressional hearing, but through certain lawsuits that happen where families try to sue social media companies, and they lost because of this section 230, because the court had to uphold um, this section. And so this section gave immunity to online platforms from civil liability based on third-party content and for the removal of content in certain circumstances. Congress originally enacted a statute to nurture a nascent industry while also incentivizing online platforms to remove content harmful to children. So I have a better explanation. I know that's very vague, what I just read.
Yeah. You need to
But
explain it in simpler terms.
so, in simple terms, it means, this is from pbs.org. I thought that their analogy was really on point. It says, if a news site falsely calls you a swindler, you can sue the publisher for libel, right? If a news
Uh-huh.
outlet publishes something that's not true, you can sue the news outlet.
Okay.
But if someone posts that on Facebook, you cannot sue Facebook. You can just sue the person who posted it.
Okay.
That is what the section 230 does. Okay, initially when you think about it, okay, that makes sense to a
Right.
certain point, right? Stuff that I post, if I want to incite hate, if I want to incite whatever the case may be, that is my content and I should be liable for it. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all these platforms should not be sued for what I posted. Their job is they need to use their algorithms and AI and sift through content and make sure that I follow safety guidelines. right? And
Okay.
we hear that a lot, certain hate speech gets removed from social
Mhm.
media. We now infamously know that some of Donald Trump's tweets got deleted, especially because of January 6th. So companies have this responsibility to sort of police their platforms, but they cannot be held liable for it. Now, on the other side of the coin, and exactly why this hearing was happening, is that companies abuse Section 230 because these, like, hundreds of families. I mean, congressional hearing today literally had hundreds of families inside of people who lost their children due to suicide, due to bullying, due to buying counterfeit drugs. I mean, just a range of topics, right? Of why these parents lost their kids, and all because of social media. Let's say, for example, there was a case that they were talking about. There was a young teenager who was buying some drugs on through Snapchat. He was not trying to buy fentanyl, but the drug that he bought was laced with fentanyl. It was a counterfeit drug, and he took it and he OD'd and he died.
Mhm.
I think the kid was like 16 or 17 years old.
Okay.
And the family tried to sue Snapchat for not policing the content and taking it down, reporting it to the authorities. They need to essentially have better ways of policing the content, making sure that the content that they post does not reach audiences. And there are loopholes that these companies do provide for the content to reach the audience. And I will get to that to the hearing. Okay. But social media has a lot of benefits. Social media provides connection, like we're globally connected, but they also provide a breeding environment for child predators, for
Mm.
pedophiles, for drug abusers, drug dealers. We have a distorted image of ourselves now because everybody's fit and everybody has a great skincare routine and everybody's traveling and doing all these things, and makes people depressed. Not only makes people depressed, specifically it makes teenage girls depressed.
Yeah.
So one in every three girls between ages of 13 to 17 is depressed and is not happy with her body image because of social media. That's a staggering statistic.
I believe it.
That's why I'm saying the Section 230 initially had a good intent, but now the social media platforms have been abusing it because pretty much for content that they didn't take down, that it slipped through the cracks,
Mhm.
because like selling drugs is illegal on social media platforms, child pornography is illegal, but it goes through the cracks. And when they don't detect it and they don't take it down, and there is evidence that people reported it and that they didn't take it down, then they should be held liable, right? But they cannot be held liable because of the Section 230. So the Congress and Department of Justice for a couple of years now has been discussing of repealing Section 230 and updating the entire act. Social media companies have been heavily lobbying,
Oh, no.
and it did
You
come
said
up.
you said lobbying. Oh,
I
no.
know. Take a shot.
We already know how Alex feels about lobbying.
It came up today during the congressional hearing several times, and several senators accused social media CEOs of lobbying and preventing these acts passing Congress and actually being enforced. And they did not deny it. That's the craziest thing. Like, that is the craziest thing of all. So, I'm going to get into some of the facts about this hearing. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on kids' online safety in February 2023, they anonymously reported multiple bipartisan bills to help stop the exploitation of kids online. So, they introduced several bills working together, trying to improve the legislation when it comes to social media. So the first one is Stop CSAM Act, which supports victims and increases accountability and transparency for online platforms. CSAM stands for child sexual abuse material.
Oh my god.
The Earn It Act, which removes tech blanket immunity from civil and criminal liability under child sex abuse material laws and establishes a national commission on online child sexual exploitation prevention. The SHIELD Act, which ensures the federal prosecutors have appropriate and effective tools to address the non-consensual distribution of sexual imagery. The Project Save Childhood Act, which modernizes the investigation and prosecution of online child exploitation crimes. And the Report Act, which combats the rise in online child sexual exploitation by establishing new measures to help strengthen the reporting of those crimes to the cyber tip line. All these, when you read it, sound very straightforward, okay? Ensuring the safety of our kids on social media. However, the reality is so much different because if Congress starts policing social media, it's not good for anybody, okay? The government is then too much involved into a private sector, which a lot of people argue against because we don't want government to overstep its reach. And then if we enact more strict rules on how social media platforms are marketing themselves to children, especially ages 13 to 17, then they're not tapping that audience who is very fragile at that age to get addicted to social media, which is really their intent, right? Because that's what makes the content and that's what makes money. So I hope you're ready to get shocked because I'm going to read some of the statements. Okay. So I turned into the hearing when Lindsey Graham was grilling the CEOs. He asked if they're going to support any of these acts. Discord, the CEO of Discord, said he does not support any of the acts proposed. Instagram and Facebook, which is Mark Zuckerberg, he said that he does not support repealing Section 230. TikTok CEO said that without further examination of these acts, he cannot support it. And then Lindsey Graham brought up that yesterday, just yesterday, January 30th, CEO of TikTok in Israel quit because TikTok failed to suppress anti Israel hashtags and promote pro Hamas content. And so he ended up quitting from his job, and they asked the TikTok CEO about it. Graham stated how not only do these companies not support any of these acts, right? I think the only person that it said that supported the SHIELD Act was the CEO of X, a former Twitter. She just took that job a few months ago, and she seemed like more open to policing some of the content. But TikTok, Discord, Snapchat, and Meta were not in favor of any of these acts.
Which CEO came off as the biggest dick?
I would say Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay.
And I say that because he was very defensive. He was talking over the senators. He was asked very serious questions and he did not give appropriate answers. He gave bullshit answers. Senator Hawley, he got his rounds of questions and he asked Mark Zuckerberg, did he apologize to the families of the victims of kids that died?
Yikes. Okay.
And he was sort of like taken aback by that question, but he didn't stop. He was like, did you apologize? Did you do something for these families? Do you want to apologize right now? They're right behind you. You should apologize to these families. And he stood up, turned to the families, and he said the following thing. I'm sorry for everything you have all been through, he said. No one should go through the things that your families have suffered, and this is why we invest so much, and we're going to continue doing industry-wide efforts to make sure no one has to go through the things your families had suffered.
What efforts are you talking to? What
So
efforts are you talking about, guy?
exactly. They were giving like some bullshit answers how they have this like sophisticated AI and how they're spotting the content. But I'm not a fan of Senator Ted Cruz for several reasons. However, I love him in any congressional hearing. Every congressional hearing, this dude delivers. Okay. And this is why I said in the beginning, there's a lot of bullshit that goes on that is for the mainstream media, and that's what sells the content. But in reality, a lot of these people behind doors actually do good things on both sides of the aisle. Okay. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas.
Can't wait for it. What is it?
He, like, this dude has no filter. I don't know if you know who he is. He's
No,
the
I
guy
have.
that was he was the guy that was accused for like flying to Mexico with his kids when 2 years ago there was like record snow in Texas and people lost power and everything, and him and his family went to Cancun.
Yes.
So, he is very famous for the way like he speaks. To me, sometimes I feel like he's very rude, but sometimes in these congressional hearings, I feel like you have to be very rude.
Right. Yeah.
This dude brought receipts. I mean, like, this dude literally had receipts. He had a person standing behind him holding a huge panel that had a printout from Instagram. This was the line of questioning. So for the people that were searching for child sex abusive and explicit content on Instagram, Instagram gave you an option when you search for these keywords: child abuse, child sex abuse. It brought up this like warning screen, and that's what it was printed on a panel. And it gave them an option to seek help resources like mental health resources, or at the bottom it said view content anyway.
Oh my God.
And so he was like, why did you give them the option to view this content anyway? And Mark Zuckerberg was just like, oh, well, the basic science, why we might do that, why we might offer, is because we might be wrong in labeling certain content child sex abuse. So we just want to give them an option. And this dude fucking loses it. And he like starts yelling at him. And he was like, what was your next step? Why would you do that? What, like, in what mind did you think that this is appropriate for you to put this like view content anyway? You flagged obviously something as child abuse and you didn't stop people from viewing it. And so he's like, you said that it might have been wrongly reported content. Did anyone do anything about protecting this child? Did anybody verify what this content actually was? Like, did anyone follow up to see if this was actually child abuse? And like he was just like, oh, well, we don't look at it that way. We just, like, we have these algorithms and we partnered up with this third party that verifies our content. He's like, you're giving me fucking bullshit answers. Like, stop fucking talking bullshit. And he was like, that's why I said I feel like Mark Zuckerberg was like the biggest dick, because he was just so defensive of
Yeah.
everything that he was being accused. But everything that he was being accused, it was like, holy shit, like, you allowed this to happen to our fucking kids.
And he's not even phased by it.
Yeah,
He's not even phased. It's just like I feel sick to my stomach. I'm not some sick fuck using social media for these terrible, terrible things. It wouldn't even come to my mind to search something like that. But the fact that you can do that and that comes up, I am sick to my stomach.
I know. And I didn't know. I'm not very familiar with Discord platform.
My son has it.
I know it's a big gamer.
It's a gamer thing.
Last year, if you remember, there was that Air Force kid that leaked some classified documents for that. He was Air Force from Massachusetts.
Girl, you gotta assume that I don't know
Yeah,
because
I see. I see
if
my
it
mistakes.
doesn't come from you, and it's not like beaten down in the headlines, I do not know about it.
So last year, I don't remember the time frame, maybe like summer of 2023, 21-year-old kid. He was in Air Force Air Guard, and he worked as a contractor on a military base and had a top secret security clearance. I cannot even believe I'm saying this. He was very active on Discord, and he was bragging to his Discord friends that he has access to all this classified information. So he went to work one day and he downloaded
Oh no.
top secret documents about Ukrainian assets and US assets, if I remember correctly, like US assets that we had in Ukraine and certain Ukrainian strategic positions and locations. And he posted these documents into a Discord chat,
Oh my god.
and nobody noticed for like weeks. And then finally, somebody reported it, and then a kid got arrested. He's still in jail. He's being charged for espionage. Two people from his command got fired. Like, it was this whole thing, right? But so that was like my introduction to Discord. I was not aware that Discord contains pornography.
Uh,
Like, it's a chat room or whatever, like, that you can join.
uh-huh.
And I guess when you it's based on your age. So like if you are over, I don't know, 18 maybe. I don't know what the age limit is for pornographic content, but let's say 18 or 21. If you when you make your profile, it makes you verify your age. So if you're not the appropriate age, you cannot join this like adults only and share pornographic content. However, they were speculating today that sometimes that content gets promoted to the wrong audience. And so I guess certain group of teenagers was exposed to unwanted pornography on Discord and in Meta. So on Facebook and Instagram, there was I guess a whistleblower last year from Meta came forward, and he quit Meta because he was concerned over safety or lack of safety for the children. And so he said that girls between 13 and 15, 37% of them have been exposed to nudity in the last 7 days. 24 have been exposed to unwanted nudity, and 17% have been exposed to self-harm content. And it was a memo that was sent to Mark Zuckerberg, and he ignored it. And they brought like all of these congressmen that were stating all these things, they all like brought actual memos that were sent to Congress. So
Do you think with this that it's just too much content being pushed out and that's the problem? Are they or what else is it? Is it, just not caring enough? Do they just not have enough staff? What is it?
I think it's a mix of things. With Meta specifically, I personally think that they're too big and they monopolized, and it's very hard to contain all that. I mean, they own Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp, and I think it is very hard to monitor all that. They have been having some challenges with staffing. We've seen that last year where a lot of tech companies were laying off their employees. All of those companies did lay off employees. X actually, they laid off majority of their safety employees when Elon Musk took over Twitter. So I think it's a mix of just abundance of content. I mean, there's just so much content, even for me, right? Like, I am in my mid 30s, so I'm not worried about, being exposed to,
Filters, yeah.
yeah, like being exposed to certain things. And I think I know how to filter through, like, very randomly, if I'm scrolling through reels, I will find something like about self-harm or somebody promoting like suicidal thoughts or something, and I usually know how to recognize that and like, oh, what the hell, like, this is super weird. But somebody who is maybe 14 years old does not know how to recognize that. And so I don't know if I wrote this part up, but it came up during the hearing. I think they were asking either Snapchat or Meta. They were asking them about this. There were two instances where a kid committed suicide because he was feeling depressed, and it was TikTok. Now I remember. I'm sorry. It was TikTok. So the kid was feeling depressed, and he was searching for like inspiration quotes, or like self-help quotes or something like that. I think he was like looking to lift his spirits. Well, 9 out of 10 contents that came up for him were about self-harm and suicide, and the kid ended up committing suicide.
How do you know that? You just go into their account and you just watch what's
I think
curated
so.
for them? Mm.
Yeah. The argument that Mark Zuckerberg made several times is that he wanted to give more parental control, and the senators were telling him that there's no more parental control that you can do. A lot of parents feel overwhelmed with the technology that's out there. They feel like it's not very self-intuitive. It's not like you don't know what you're doing. Also, you can't prevent everything, so you're putting down a lot on that parent to
All it
protect.
takes all it takes is one kid to dwell on one piece of content that is not good for them, and then all of a sudden the algorithm changes. So
Absolutely.
having the parents monitor it or giving them more control is it's not going to work.
No, and that's what they were arguing today, telling pretty much them that you can put this on the parents. Like, you have to be
No.
responsible for what your platforms are doing.
Mhm.
And the fact that you're not protecting these kids. And something that came up, I guess there was like another internal memo. Mark Zuckerberg has been subpoenaed several times over the last few years over several different issues, but majority of them were safety, some type of safety. Not all the time child safety, but there's a reoccurring theme over here that we're not protecting the people that are engaging in the content on these social media platforms. And so there was an internal memo that claimed that somebody within Meta did analysis and said that a child lifetime is worth to Meta $270 per user. Like, they brought up the memo, and he was just like, he was sweating, he was like very visibly uncomfortable. But I'm like, how are we not making him step down at this point? He did an amazing thing. He built this social media platform like out of his college dorm. He had nothing. He's like the underdog that we all root for. But now you grew too big.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you're making these unethical statements and just gross and cringe and like disgusting statements about how these children are like, you view them in dollar signs. You put a value per user.
No, there's
Like,
no integrity. He has zero integrity.
all of them. I mean, and then TikTok, and you and I discussed this long time ago, about the safety, right? And
Mhm.
you and I
Yep.
both have TikToks for this platform, and we have separate devices for it. And
Mm.
I would never do it on my personal phone where I have all of my personal information, because TikTok is owned by China,
Mhm.
and majority of the hearing today, they were grilling him on Chinese government because there is an active interest. The investigation is still not open officially, but last year, he was in front of Congress because Congress was looking into banning TikTok in United States.
I remember that.
And what came out of that is that they made TikTok start a new cloud here in the US, stored in the US, because previously has been stored in China. And it's stored here in Texas. It's called Project Texas. And since 2021, it started storing all of the US citizens' information there with a US company on US soil. And they claim that the Chinese government does not have access to it. However, there are certain issues that Congress has, and I have personal concerns with TikTok as well. Chinese Communist Party controls a lot of companies in China, and one of the laws that they have is that the companies that operate there have to comply with Chinese laws. And one of those laws is that they have to share all the user info that I have with the Chinese intelligence community. So that means that Chinese intelligence can collect our information. And I know a lot of people say, like, oh, well, I don't care what they collected on us. On a micro level, they don't care about you. They don't care that you and I are sharing cat videos with each other.
For the record, I do not share cat videos with you.
You do share cat videos with me. Stop lying to our listeners.
That's a lie.
I will bring receipts. Don't make me do it. So, on a micro level, they don't really care for the individual. What they do care about is aggregate data. It's what we do as a society. What are the trends of us? What are we looking into? What is our algorithm? What are our daily habits? What do we like to do? What are we into? What are we reading? And then they can decide how they can infiltrate based on their political interests. If there is a Chinese interest in changing our algorithms or changing how we view certain things or certain people or our leaders, our government, insert issue, they can insert that content through TikTok, through social media, into our phones, into our devices, tablets, wherever you're on social media, because they collected all this metadata on us, and they know not only our birthdays and our locations, but they also know our likes, our dislikes, what are we into, who are we voting for, and then they can mass change. And I'm loosely gonna use term recruit, but that's really what it is. Like, you see how we get polarized. We're either far left or far right.
Yeah, we're influenced. Yeah.
Exactly. And that all happens. People are now more either far right or far left because of social media. Because that content, that's what gives you the shock factor. It's the wow factor. It's what makes something get reposted. Okay. Nobody cares about the truth, because the truth doesn't make headlines. What makes headlines is like these insane things and wild conspiracies.
Right.
And you
Emotion.
exactly, and you see them on both sides. And I mean, I'm definitely a victim of that, because I would go on social media and then I would see somebody posting like completely inaccurate accounts of what's happening in our government, and then I'm like, probably 8 out of 10 times I start typing up a comment to these videos, and I'm typing and I'm typing and I'm typing, and I'm like,
Don't do it.
yeah, like I ask myself, do I want to invite all these idiots now into discussing me? Because there is no, you can't level with them, and then I
No.
delete the comment. And very rarely I would leave comments, on somebody's post, just because I would have like certain facts to state.
No.
And so I asked myself, I try to do better and not engage into, stupidity on social media, but sometimes it's hard. But that's the impact of social media, and they know that. These
It,
CEOs that were grilled today, they know exactly what they're doing, and they know what their content and what their platforms do. In case of TikTok, he was grilled a lot on the safety of our data. But Mark Zuckerberg, he got grilled, I think, more than anybody else, just because the spread of Facebook and Instagram is so
right.
much bigger than TikTok, Snapchat, and any of these platforms. And he did not have the right answers. He was very cocky. He was very argumentative.
That's pretty gross.
Yeah. There's something else that I wanted to bring up. I was going to ask you, do you know about this like whole Taylor Swift deep fake that has been going online?
Yes. Yep. The AI stuff.
Yeah, it was pornographic content essentially that was shared on X. And I was surprised that this didn't come up today in the hearing, because the content was reported and it was taken down by the original creator, or X took it down, but it was reposted like hundreds of thousands of times. They essentially did not contain it, and it spread. And like 3 days later, it was still being reposted and shared on X, and they just like didn't know how to handle the situation. And so I was surprised that that was not brought up, because that was like a perfect example of what that does.
Yeah.
Senator Whitehouse, I really have to say, and I want to emphasize this so much, and I know I brought it up earlier, but pretty much every senator that was questioning them was like in this aggressive bulldog mode, and was like very strict and very to the point, telling them that they suck at what they do and that they need to do better. And Senator Whitehouse was talking about Doe versus Twitter. There was a lawsuit that happened in 2020, maybe 2021. And so Doe versus Twitter was a lawsuit where sexually explicit photos of minors ages 13 and 14 were compiled in a multiple, like a image video, and it was a CSAM video, right? And this video was reported by a concerned citizen, and Twitter took no action. This was all happening in 2019. So there's this CSAM compilation video going around, being reposted, shared, and gets reported. Nothing happens. 2019, the plaintiff, the person that was in one of the videos, it was a minor. He was in high school. He became aware of the video from his classmates in January of 2020. He became suicidal, and him and his family contacted law enforcement and Twitter, and the Twitter finally took the video down once the feds got involved into it. Number one, that's insane. That's the fact that federal authorities had to get involved into taking down child sexual abuse content is like
Right. Like
crazy.
you couldn't have made that call yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And so families sued Twitter for all those months for refusing to take down an explicit video of this child, and in Twitter invoked Section 230. So, and they lost the case. And this is why I say, Section 230 initially sounds really good because it protects these companies, but it also sounds really bad because it protects these companies.
Yeah.
And a lot of senators, when they ask these questions, they ask for certain things in writing. So they asked from all of the CEOs to write down which act are they going to support, and they're going to have to support something of the ones that I named in the beginning. And they have to provide in writing to the Judiciary Committee Section 230. What are they willing to accept to modify that section? Because that section is very vague. That's all it is. Section 230 is literally 26 words. It does not provide anything else. Okay. So they have to provide in writing to the Senate what are they willing to compromise on, right? And then the Senate is going to take that into consideration and probably hold more hearings to get to the bottom of this, and told them to bear in mind Doe versus Twitter case, because the Section 230, like, they lost this case because of this section, which should have never happened. Twitter should have compensated that family for
Yeah.
not taking down this content.
These CEOs, man, they don't want accountability.
Yeah. And I said lobbyism is going to come up multiple times during this episode, and I'm going to make good on that promise. So, number one, Meta is probably the biggest lobbyist when it comes to not repealing certain sections and acts that are in place now that are outdated. They were accused of shutting down several acts that were brought up throughout the years because they've been heavily lobbying the government. And when I say government, it doesn't matter who is in the office. Okay, is it the Democratic Party or Republican Party? They all take money willingly and very gladly with open hands. And so the fact that these large companies have ability to do that makes it very hard on Congress and Senate to make any type of decision when it's hard to vote because all these senators are accepting money. So, and agencies, I really have to say that it's not just that the individuals are accepting money, it's all these federal agencies that are accepting money and then not passing legislations that will protect our citizens, especially our children. Lobbyism comes up again through TikTok, and we started talking about it a little bit. TikTok is being grilled based on the security of our data and of our citizens. And I mean, the questions that they were asking him, he was so uncomfortable. He looks like a very nervous person to begin with. And he just didn't know how to handle any of that. He was very uncomfortable. He was sweating his ass off. And he couldn't fight off. Like, they were just like a whole bunch of dogs barking at him. And he was just like super scared. TikTok has been on this heavy campaign trying to show, I don't know, like if you watch Hulu or Amazon Prime or any of those streaming platforms, they have ads on them about TikTok, how TikTok is this like latest and greatest thing, how it helps all these creators share their content, sell their products, like it changed their lives. And that is all part of their wider campaign to like appeal to the American public, how they're safe and they're good and good for the community, good for small businesses. And they have been so heavily lobbying Biden administration that they visited, TikTok lobbyists visited White House more than 40 times in 2022.
Oh, Lord.
Like, that's an insane number.
Yeah.
And so they asked him to provide a number. How many times did they visit the White House in 2023? And he didn't have the number. And they said, you better provide that in writing. How many times did your lobbyists go to the White House trying to lobby the government to allow you to work here? And I think several times what it came up as well is Biden administration almost seems like a sympathizer of the Chinese government, even though publicly he doesn't state that. But certain Republican senators were trying to sort of push that sentiment that TikTok is still operating in the US because Biden administration is in the
Mhm.
White House and not Trump administration. I think that's the gist of everything.
That was a lot. Oh my gosh.
I know. So this is not over. There's going to be more hearings about this. They have been made really uncomfortable, and they were grilled heavily, and they were accused of, like, essentially they were accused of allowing sex trafficking to happen on their platforms, and they did absolutely nothing. So it was pretty insane.
That's terrible. And it just reinforces my reasoning with not allowing my children on any sort of social media because, I mean, for obvious reasons, but this is even deeper than that. So I'm going to continue to be resolute with that because all of this shit that goes beyond what I even thought was happening. So there's that.
I agree. I think it is, you almost take on a certain responsibility when you let your kids go online and participate in social media. And I'm not a parent, so I can't speak for myself, but I think a lot about, like, what would I do in situations like this, because I don't, like, you don't know what the right answer is. You don't want them to be outcasts and not have this social life, because that's what their generation is. And
Mhm.
sometimes for us it's very hard to understand that, because we didn't grow up like that. We didn't grow up with social media, like we were face to face. And I noticed that a lot of kids nowadays tend to be more socially awkward in person, but they have a very rich social life online. But you have to make a conscious decision there that you're taking a risk of putting them online.
Yeah,
And
their mental state is too delicate, for so long, and they can't reason like we do, and they can't manipulate like we do as far as what we're curating for ourselves. They don't realize what's happening. And as much as you try to inform them, it's still not enough because this is beyond, these people hire the best of the best to do these things and to influence us in ways that we're not even aware of half the time. So it's not something that I'm really willing to negotiate on. And whether, and they'll get over it, just be present and limit their time. And it's the way it's going to stay.
Yeah, I agree. Well, are they even allowed to be on social media, like age wise?
All of their peers are on social media, so you could easily lie and do it. So it makes it a little more difficult because you want to fit in with people, like you said, but it at what cost? And I know the cost because you and I talk about it all the time of how shitty we can feel sometimes, and comparison is the thief of joy, and you don't even realize you're comparing yourself until you're too far down that rabbit hole. So, and that's grown ass women.
Yeah, and I mean, and they discussed that. They brought up like filters and how it affects specifically girls more than boys. But it was saying how I think I mentioned that statistic, like one in every three girls aged like 13 to 17 is not happy with her body. It's because of these filters, and it promotes plastic surgery. And I mean, the answer that Mark Zuckerberg gave was like, well, these filters are a fun thing for content creators. Like, are you shitting me right now? There are multiple studies showing you that it's bad for mental health, that it's our youth is more depressed than ever because of the social media presence and everything. And you're like, oh, well, yeah, but it gives content creators something to do, you know?
Yeah. Well,
So, yeah.
consider that source.
Yeah.
Consider it.
I have a last piece of nugget for you. I thought it was pretty interesting that they brought this up. Amy Klobuchar, a senator, she said because one of the acts that is proposed is to start a government agency that is going to police
I was about to
these social
say.
medias. And she said, and so all of these CEOs were like opposed to that act, and they don't want another government agency to get, all eyes on them. She said, when Boeing door flew off, no one questioned the decision that we ground their planes and open up an investigation. So why are we fighting against this? Like, it was a no-brainer that when that happened with Boeing, government got involved and they prevented another incident. But when a child gets killed or commits suicide or gets depressed because of social media, and an increasing number of kids are experiencing that, we are not doing anything. And now that they got into the congressional hearing, they're trying to fight it, and like, oh, why are we here? I also want to point out that so it was 5 CEOs that were there. So CEO of X, Discord, and Snapchat, they actually got subpoenaed to go to this congressional hearing. So they didn't voluntarily go there. They had to get subpoenaed over their refusal over the weeks of negotiation to go to this hearing. And so Congress stopped playing games with them and was like, you know what? We're going to subpoena your ass, and you're going to come here involuntarily because you want to play games with us. So
Mhm.
only Mark Zuckerberg and I don't know the name of the Snapchat. I think his last name is Spiegel.
It's not surprising. Not
Yeah.
surprising. Great reference to the Boeing. Great comparison to the Boeing situation, which just, if you're a listener of us, you were informed about that incident well before this. So consider yourself in the know.
Yep. You're
I love
welcome.
that. You're welcome. You're welcome. Wow. So that was a big episode, guys. That was a big episode, and there was so much to learn from it and so much to take away from it. So, sit with that for a while. It was still enjoyable to listen to, and although it was a tough topic, we have to hear about it. We have to talk about it and get those gears turning because, like Alex also mentioned, stuff to consider when you're going to vote. So,
Yes, absolutely. I do have a question for you. Was this episode worth it changing our topic last minute?
you fucked with my flow. I will tell you that. And you know how I like structure. But yeah, no, I think it's really important to talk about right now, and it's happening right as we speak. So it's top of mind, and there's a lot of information, I'm sure, right now about it, and people can watch the hearing. So I think that we needed to talk about it tonight. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. I felt the same. As I was listening to that, I was like, we have to talk about this right now as it's happening. Number one, it's fresh. It was fresh in my mind, and that's why I started taking notes, because there was a lot of things that I wanted to address. But I think this is a prime time now at its beginnings of this hearing to educate ourselves and
Right.
spread the word to other parents and even
Right.
people that are not parents,
Right.
who want to be safer online, who might be susceptible to some certain content that makes them depressed or makes
Yeah.
them question themselves, or in their mental health. So I think it was important.
The awareness is getting out there. That's what's most
Yes.
important. Great. Well, thanks for tuning in to Not Your Average Breakdown. That was a really big breakdown for us. And before you head off, remember, we want to hear from you. Drop us a line at nyabpodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on our socials. It's not too soon, right? We could talk about social.
Wait, yeah.
Too soon. No, not too soon.
Yeah.
But make sure you're doing it responsibly. Hit us up. Our content is actually good for you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, X, Snap. Take your pick. We're ready for some banter.
Yes, we're still on social media, but we are using it
I know.
responsibly. And I think
Yes.
so far we did not have any content taken down or flagged. I think we're very respectful in our ways.
Yep.
I mean, our Trump golden showers video was not taken down, so I
Yeah, I
think
know. We didn't get
that
taken
is
down from that. We are antagonizing some big private companies, and we haven't been taken down. So, keep with us. We're going to try to bring you the most transparent information as possible.
yeah. And if you thought that we were not on the list from last episode, no, we're definitely on the list.
We're done. How many? We're going to have to keep a count. All right, guys, thanks for sitting with us again, and we're excited to have you back next week. We'll see ya.
Bye, everyone.